Hey guys, it's me, Varun Vumdi. On this episode of Stars and Startups, we speak with the young CEO of Visual AI, Jaspreet Makkar. Jaspreet talks about how he started hacking together quadcopters for the fun of it in college and sold those crude copters to make some pocket money. He then transformed that passion into action to build his startup that just started taking on any project to now managing over 35% of Indian solar assets with a large set of impressive businesses. The client list comprises of 27 of 35 companies in the solar space, all of which was grown in just 18 months since they solved for this segment. A must listen episode to understand how businesses are being built on new tech. While in lockdown, Jaspreet also shares the things that he's been up to keep busy. Now, over to the show.
Sessions. I mean, I love baking, cooking either way, but doing a lot of fermentation every day. Every day I've been fermenting food, so that's been pretty cool.
Fermenting matlab you're doing like sourdough and stuff or pickles?
Also, a lot of things. So I've done sauerkraut, I've done sourdough. I made my hot sauce yesterday. I'm doing kombucha. I also done tepache. Tepache is a fermented pineapple Mexican beverage, alcoholic. Made
So
my own
it's
alcohol.
so what you use yeast for
So most of these things taking the natural yeast and bacteria from the air. You don't need any commercial yeast.
right. So tepache also becomes alcoholic with just mm, the bacteria in the
Tepache is
air.
easiest thing ever. You just need pineapple peel, eat the good stuff, put all the bad stuff into water, and let it be for 2 days. You have an alcoholic beverage ready.
What are you saying?
Because the pineapple, the skin already has yeast and bacteria on it. So you
Okay.
just let it have to ferment for 2 days. The good bacteria does its job, the bad bacteria dies, and it ferments into an alcoholic beverage.
So you don't have to give it a good wash or something?
No, nothing. Like, don't even bother because anyway, the bacteria is sort of going to do its good job, right? So, I mean, of course, if you know that the pineapple is coming from a source where there's a lot of pesticide being used, wash it as well as you can. But Big Basket
Okay.
also has organic pineapples now, which are not really differently priced. 59 for the regular one, 70 for the organic one. So,
And so you don't have to care about the theka being opened or
that
not.
my father is worrying about. He's finished all of my alcohol stock at home.
I mean, Delhi NCR. I think this is the only thing they're concerned about, right? When is the store going to get opened?
My dad's
In
founder supplier today, so he's shipping him some bottles.
Are you kidding me? So
Yes,
before the
man.
lockdown, my father-in-law had, had ordered some alcohol from Gurgaon. So I went and picked up. It was a pretty massive case of alcohol. And I was thinking, okay, Gurgaon mein Theka is always open. I can go anytime.
Right.
And 3 days later, lockdown. So my father-in-law has all the alcohol and I have nothing.
Oh no, but thekas are still open in Gurgaon. No? Some of them.
I don't know these places. You need to text me about this.
Sure. I did talk to one of those guys last week. He was open.
That's hilarious. So, Jaspreet, let's jump into talking about your interests. How did you get into technology? And I read somewhere that you started your first startup and hacking robots and toys and electronics at a very young age. How did all this come to be? Are your parents engineers? Did they always leave stuff around for you? What was the interest? Where did all of this start?
Well, I guess my parents are not engineers to start with, but my dad's a businessman, and he always sort of put the seed in me that you have to go out and start caring for yourself, start earning for yourself as soon as possible. So I sort of grew up in an environment wherein I was repeatedly um, told that it's good to be self-sufficient while the family has the means to take good care of you, but you should be self-sufficient and you should go out and start earning for yourself pretty soon. So that motivation, intrinsic motivation, was always there. And while this intrinsic motivation to earn and make a living was there, I was also very attracted towards just breaking things apart. I don't know. I was very curious about how things are built, how things are made, and I sort of felt that I could take things apart and build them into something better. Though it never happened. But
What is
as
the
a
first
kid,
thing you took apart?
I took about every single thing that came to the house. I mean, all sorts of electronics, TVs, remotes, radio, CD players, even telephones, everything that came into home. I couple of weeks into the device coming home, I used to take it apart. So I had a fabulous childhood. I mean, I have no idea how my parents managed to be with a child like me, but then it was beautiful, the entire process.
At least they let you be and not curb that enthusiasm and excitement.
My family has been crazy supportive. I mean, they always let me tinker around with things. They got me a computer while I was pretty young. I think the first system that I had access to was when I was in class fourth or fifth, which is I think pretty early even for those times. So I mean, my family has been crazy supportive.
You're a Noida boy, and you've been there all your life. Studied also in Noida, in Delhi.
Been here all my life. Did my schooling from Noida, did my engineering from JP Noida, and then again been working here itself.
So why? How did you end up at doing We Do Sky and Visual AI? How do you end up doing this? Why do you give us and our audience a little bit of your journey? How you got here? What have you done to get there?
So I think one thing that I keep hearing from a lot of people who are starting up is, "Your idea, Nia, what do I do? How do I know this is the right thing to do?" So what I've realized over my journey is that there is never a moment wherein you take a leap and say that, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do." It's always opportunities coming from opportunities, and you have to sort of just be open to whatever is right in front of you. Take that leap and continue getting more opportunity as you move forward. So honestly, Video Sky did not start from a eureka moment that, hey, we are going to use drones and do these things. It started as a transition. So once I entered the college, I got interested in robotics. And predominantly since the interest in robotics was there, the interest in money making was there as well. So I transitioned to giving robotics workshops to college students and making college projects. So this was while I was still in college, making a decent amount of pocket money from these activities. Right after the college, I worked on a quadcopter based project. So I interned with a defense robotics company for a couple of months and soon realized that there's going to be a huge potential for drones in India. And that's how one opportunity led to another and sort of ended up with me starting up Video Sky. So I think the intrinsic lesson here is that don't wait for the moment. I think perfect ideas don't exist. Taking up the opportunities as they come and leaping onto better opportunities, being exposed to them on the journey, in the journey, that's what's happened with me always. And I think that's been the story with most of the people around me.
So interning at a defense robotics company, how did you land that? Because we don't hear often these stories, especially in India. How did that happen?
So while I was still in my fourth year of college, I was still selling crude copters. So I mean, I was building them at my lab in college, building them here at home, and then selling them off to people who wanted to buy a cheap quadcopter. So I was still sort of building and selling quadcopters in college. And there was this robotics defense company based out of Noida itself, who were also working on defense-related quadcopters. So it was a natural synergistic match wherein a couple of months I worked with them and I sort of worked as a consultant, wherein they were also building quadcopters. I had an interest, so both of us worked together for a couple of months. But that's where I realized truly that, I mean, what could be done with these machines?
Understood. So why don't you take us through? You're the founder of We Do Sky and Visual AI. For those who don't know what these companies are, can you give us a little bit of background into what it is and what kind of clients do you support and how did it come to be?
Sure, sure. So Video Sky started out as a drone services company. To understand why a drone services company is needed, we'll have to go back and trace the root of how telephone lines actually started working. So if you come to the development of this entire industry, you would remember, some of us would remember that there used to be PCO booths earlier, wherein when people did not have telephone lines, landlines at their home, they used to go to a service provider who was a PCO booth and then get their phone calls done from there. So the drone industry was in that exact phase till about a year ago, wherein people had started realizing the benefits of having a drone in their business operations, but they technically did not have access to the technology. So there was a layer of service providers that was needed. The service providers would again procure the drone, fly the drones, and give the data to the company. So this is the opportunity that we wanted to tap on. We realized on pretty early that drone as a service, which is what Vidusky used to do, is a short-term opportunity wherein you can make some money by flying drones for people. But eventually businesses would start using them every day, and hence service providing would not be a very fruitful, long-term sustainable business. So Vidusky was a transitioning business from selling drones to providing drone-based services. Very soon we found our own niche in solar. That's how we renamed the software that we built in the journey to Visual AI. So now it's a predominant solar asset management tool, and we use drones and a couple of other sensors to see how well a solar asset is working.
You know what's been interesting to hear you say this? There's been a lot of talk about drones for the last 3 years, 4 years, over the last 4 years. And same with blockchain, right? People talk a lot about blockchain, what it can do, how it can change the world. But very few use cases come to be which have actually generated revenue and become a business. They're great ideas. They, have commercial drones. You have, there's obviously quadcopters are called drones are called drones. There's a lot of misutilization of the terms and technology. So from hearing from you, it seems like you zoned in on one business opportunity, which was saying, hey, can we go and solve for managing solar panels and assets, which are very hard to do? Is it hard to do? Was that a big problem? How was it a use case? Like, because you typically, as a business person, you try to evaluate what the size of the industry would look like. And these are not very easy things to evaluate, especially when it comes to the specific business you're talking about. So how do you go about that?
So before we cornered down on solar, we did a lot of projects in mining, construction. For construction, we had a tie-up with Common for Proprietary Housing, and we did about 500 of those projects in 9 months. So we did try our hands at all sorts of industries and decided on solar predominantly for a couple of reasons. So the second biggest use case in India for drones is mining or agriculture. And both of these two industries have been around for hundreds of years now. On the other hand, solar is in general a new industry. So the large scale utility solar farms have only been around for about 7 years now. So technically solar is as new as drones are. And hence the industry will in general be more receptive towards new technologies because it in itself is a new technology. Secondly, the beautiful learning while working with solar clients was that the construction of a solar asset takes about a year, but the maintenance needs to be done for 25 long years. So from the perspective of a solar developer, they want to have a stable pipeline of operations and maintenance that can continue for 20-25 years. So the algorithms that are working on their asset today, the learnings that are happening from today will probably be used 20 years from now. And hence it made a lot more sense for us as a business to be getting into this domain, wherein you do something today, but it's going to be used for that same asset 20 years. So you can potentially have a revenue stream coming from the same analytics that you did today, 20 years later on as well. So that's why it's a very beautiful opportunity to be there in solar operations and maintenance.
So how does this work? How does Visual AI work? Can you give us a lowdown?
Sure. So conventional solar farm has a large number of solar modules. So anywhere between 3 lakh individual solar modules to 10 lakh solar modules. And to give you an estimate, a solar module would be approximately the size of a human being. So it's large, it's not small. Now see if there are about 5 lakh modules spread, this large module spread across the field, it'll probably cover a kilometer or 2 square kilometers. It'll be a very large field. And analyzing what's going wrong at the site is very difficult. I mean, if you ask a human to traverse the entire site edge to edge, it'll probably take him a couple of hours. And more often than not, these assets are built where the temperatures are not really pleasant. So asking someone to go out and check if the modules are working properly or not in 50 degrees Celsius is inhuman. You can't really expect that to be done. So that's conventionally the definition of a use case where drones could come handy. Instead of sending a human, send a drone, let the drone see what's happening on the ground, prepare a report identifying that, hey, out of the 500,000 modules on the ground, these are the 100 that need your attention. send the human on those 100 instead of the 500,000. So that's predominantly the use case. That's how we started in the first place. We went to solar companies, told them that, hey, we know there are lapses at your site. You know that there are lapses at your site. We can help you identify those lapses quickly and cheaply. A pitch that worked very, very well for us. And soon we realized that the lapses are much, much more than what is visible as an outsider to the industry. And that's how we started penetrating deeper. We realized that there's a lot of sensory data that's being captured. There are IoT sensors installed all across the solar farm. And the amount of data that's being generated, no one can really sit and analyze that. So there was a big data opportunity. And since all of this was happening, we realized that we could probably connect all of these different ecosystems together, a drone and IoT, a deep learning slash big data opportunity together into one access file management software, which could really help these assets perform better over a longer period of time.
Was there ever a regulatory challenge when it came to this? It seems like you're using the airspace to do it, and my understanding is that it does have some regulatory challenges. A lot has been written about in the media recently about how the DGCA is the particular governing authority.
Correct.
Did you guys have the same challenges?
So the drone industry in India has really struggled. I mean, the fight has been real and it's been there for about 4 years now. And of course, we too had our moments wherein we had to really struggle to get the permissions to fly these drones. But thankfully for us, solar farms are technically not really within the cities. I mean, you wouldn't find a solar farm in Delhi, but probably 50 kilometers outside of Delhi, you'll find a solar asset. And these areas are usually not areas where there's any national security at risk. There are no national borders, and there are usually very, very less crowds. So for us, flying in remote locations has been relatively easier, but the pain point for the entire industry, specifically the drone space, has been very legit. And a lot of companies face a lot of problems while flying drones within cities, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, most of the major cities.
So for each flight, and I'd imagine you have different times of the day where the particular visual test happens.
Correct.
So do you have to take permissions for each and every flight? How does that kind of play out in managing the asset?
So the process right now is pretty simple. You go to the local district authorities and you say that, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the agenda. And this is why it's important. And you inform them and take permissions from the local district authorities. On the other hand, VGCA came up with a platform called Digital Sky, wherein the intent was to automate this entire process. If it's safe for you to fly a drone, you put an application online, you get the permissions, you fly. And if it's not, you don't get the permissions. It was supposed to be this simple. But intrinsically, the bureaucracy takes its own sweet time. And it's been about a year and a half now that this idea was actually launched in a big manner. But very few companies are being granted permissions to fly on the ground. So a lot of drones are still operational. At any moment, you will find probably hundreds of drones in the sky in India. But all of them, I hope, are taking permissions from district authorities and doing it in a legal manner. For those who aren't, I mean, a lot of things are not enforced in India.
So you're saying that there is a gray area where there is utilization but not necessarily approval, but technically it is illegal to do that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, interestingly, if you look at the entire picture, government has been one of the largest revenue generators for drone companies. And I mean, the government in itself is pushing out drone flights without permissions. So railways has been using drones in a large manner. Prime Minister Modi recently said, I think yesterday or the day before, that he wants entire villages to be mapped with drones. And I mean, all of these activities are happening, and I'm not sure how much of it is actually legal, but I mean, it's for a good cause.
Interesting. So just to take a step back, when you talked about the managing drone assets and when it is utilized, time of day, location, all of that, and especially temperature, is there a in India, at least, there is a human element or human cost, which is not very expensive to hire 5 guys to walk the field, right? And that's always been the trade-off for a lot of businesses. Do I use a tool or do I use a person? Though, ultimately with a drone, you're probably going to be able to generate more data points, and the utilization is going to be more longer term and even more usable, right? The data itself is more usable in the long run and verified because you can't fudge that data. So how do
Correct.
you so how do you propose this as a value proposition to these businesses? And was this something that you had to kind of work around?
Sure. So I think most businesses in India face the issue of costing. How can you be cheaper than cheap labor in India? So I think the pitch in itself is sort of not the right one to begin with. Companies shouldn't be ideally pitching basis cost. They should be pitching basis value. What is the value that's being created with the technology? Of course, you'll always find a human doing the same job in a cheaper manner if time is not a constraint. Uh, Luckily for us, drones did offer a great cost benefit as well. Of course, there was value that was being sold, but there was cost supplementing the value as well. So conventionally, if we ask a human to do what a drone does in 2 days, it'll take the human about 2 months. So the same job that our drone does at a solar farm in 2 days, a human will do in 2 months. And I mean, if you do the cost comparison, drones do come out to be way, way more cheaper anyway basis this same funda itself. But even if this hadn't been true, the pitch I think would have never been how cheap drones can be. The pitch would always have been how much more value that drones can create versus a human on the ground.
That's exciting. So when you get this data, is it primarily for the solar farm itself, or do you get to use it across other products and projects that you probably are running?
No, so our operations right now are 100% in the solar domain itself. We decided instead of being average in 10 industries, we'll be the best in one. And that's where we deep dived into solar. So the data predominantly is being used only for solar, but then there are a lot of cross applications that come out. So for example, we've mapped out approximately 35% of the entire Indian solar assets. And that gives a very, very deep insight. For example, which manufacturer has lower issues on the ground now that we mapped 35% of assets? What kind of solar panel layouts are better in the longer run? So there are a lot of deep insights that you get based on the large amount of data that has been captured. But then again, totally limited to solar itself.
That's interesting. So you're actually saying that you can actually tell some of these solar farms operators which manufacturer actually is a better product that they're selling, and also you're able to consult them on the design of their plants.
We haven't started yet, but I mean, the kind of data that we're sitting on and the amount of depth in that data, it's crazy. I mean, that's definitely a strong revenue source in the future.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. We are somewhat at the midway mark, but thought I'd give you a little nudge to go and subscribe to our newsletter on stars.substack.com so that these episodes can get delivered to you directly to your inbox. Please do share the episode for others to find out about the amazing guests and their stories. That's the only way people are going to find out about this content being put out there. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode.
But you have a very incredible list of clients. How did you crack this? I would imagine this took a little bit of time, but it's very impressive list. Can you give some insight on how do you go about some of these enterprise sales? I'm guessing you have a very strong value proposition, which they can't say no to. But a lot of these things do get stuck in red tape and not wanting to go past the human cost that you're talking about. I'd love to, unpack that for us.
Sure. So I think it starts from how you approach an industry. So luckily for us, it's a very small industry, solar. Even though the amount of assets that are being built and the amount of capital that's flowing around is huge, the industry in itself is very small. And you do good job with one company, it always goes back to another company, and people know very, very soon that this company is doing good things in this space. For us, there are only about 35, 40 odd companies in India that could use our services. That's about it. and almost 95% of entire solar is held between these 35 companies. So our target was very clear: do the best that you can do for the first 2 3 companies, and the message will slowly float around that this is going well. That's how it started out. And as of today, I think out of the 35 odd companies, we're working with 27 of them. So there are some 7 8 that we're not working with, but rest all of them we started from zero about a year and a half. That's when we made our first sale in solar. And in about 18 months, we've inspected 35% of Indian assets and gotten 27 out of 35 companies to use our products. So I think a few learnings would be: never say no to a client. I mean, even if a client calls us at 3 a.m., the entire team gets up as if it's 9 a.m. and they're back to work. There hasn't been a single client in our industry where we have said that no, this can't be done. Always be available. And I think that sort of pays back in a couple of months when people start realizing that these guys really mean it when they say that they care for your assets and they really want to help you. They genuinely want to help you. And that really, I think, translates into numbers eventually.
So you're basically saying you own pretty much this space for the solar business.
I mean, we don't, but for the drone perspective, we are probably a good contender in the space. We are probably a strong player in the space. Probably not the only one, but a strong player, yes.
So if you've reached, so are you saying you've reached capacity in terms of all the assets you could potentially manage in the space, or you're saying there are two enterprise accounts that need to kind of crack that will basically get you to 90%, 95%, and is that possible?
I mean, once you reach a spot wherein your clients start liking you, then you can start selling more services. I mean, you don't have to sort of stay limited to drone thermography itself. So that's what we did. I mean, when we realized that we had sort of mapped out the entire market and registered ourselves as vendors, did some good stuff with each of these enterprises, that's when we started realizing that why not sell them more? Why not sell them more of the solutions that they need right now? Why do they go to some other companies and get other things done? Why can't we offer everything to them in one single platform? So those questions started coming up. What else could we do for them? And more often than not, the answers also came from the clients itself. We had very candid conversations with all of them, told them that this is what we are good at, but this is where we want to help you. We feel these are lapses that are happening at your side. Please tell us how we can help you. And I would say 70% of the clients actually have worked with us in telling us how to build the business. So most of the things that we are doing right now, we don't come from the solar background. Everything that we are doing right now is coming from the clients itself. And hence the order book is sort of, well, the number of clients is remaining constant. The revenue from each of those clients is growing.
Are you primarily a hardware business or a software business? And have you built any specific hardware that would assist in being better at this?
So we always felt that while being in India, I mean, India is the fourth largest solar developer in the world. We always felt that the market is not just in India; it's a global opportunity. While there is competition outside of India, there are some great companies doing great things outside of India. But we felt that we could be in that space as well. And hence, we always decided to work on off the shelf available hardware, something that's available across the globe, not something that's very, very India specific. So our play entirely is software analytics. We do not have any drones. We do not have an IoT sensors. We do not have any hardware. We do not even have a drone team itself. So we have partners who understand our data requirements, and not just in India. I mean, we've done projects in Vietnam, we've done projects in Italy, US, and the model has sort of been the same. How do you find good partners, relationships with drone companies in each of these regions? How do you build value for the solar companies? And then sort of connect the dots. Ourselves, we've been a pure software play. I mean, the data comes from the ground. We do analytics on top of it, make a nice dashboard, and then give it to the solar company. That's the business for us, right?
So they're paying as a SaaS service for your software, and you have a monthly maintenance on that. Whereas the drones themselves, it's the drone partners that you work with in all of these locations to kind of support you on that. So there's no upfront cost for you. Who pays then?
I mean, the solar company gives us a lump sum amount, which includes the data collection cost, the analytics cost, the all of these different layers. And a sub cost of that entire check is also what goes to the drone partners, our data partners, data collection partners. Because I mean, the data is not only coming from drones. There are a lot of different sensors that are installed on the ground. There are a lot of manual inspections that are done, and each of these different data collection layers are done by our partners. I mean, that's the model that we chose, an asset light and operations heavy model. But I mean, the aggregation of the data and the analytics is where I feel the juice is right now.
So do you have, so these data collection partners are drone operators? So you have pilots who kind of sign up with you and say, okay, can we use our data to do what you want us to do for these drone services? And they just sign up. How?
So, one benefit of getting all of these large enterprises very, very quickly was that we had a volume of business coming in, which meant that probably, I mean, to give you an estimate, the largest solar company in India right now has about 4 gigawatts of assets.
Mhm.
And we inspected 4 gigawatt of assets in about 6 months. So, to give you a comparison, the amount of business that the largest solar company in India can give in their lifetime, we do that much of inspection in about 6 months. So for our data collection partners, it doesn't make any sense to go to the solar developer and say that, hey, I can do an inspection for you, because then they'll probably get a very small amount of business from them. But for us, it's easier. We go out and take the business from the entire solar developers, aggregate it, and give a large order to our data collection partners. And the data collection partners are again companies of all sizes. I mean, it could be a team as small as 2 members, just the two promoters trying to fly drones and get some money out of it. It could be a team of 15, 20 members as well who are doing projects not just in solar, but agriculture, real estate, different kind of industries. But predominantly these companies have drones, they have pilots, and they take permissions from DGCA, go out to fly the drones. We tell them how to collect the data. As per our specifications, the data is collected and given to us.
So this is still a manual setup. Do you think this will ever get automated where, I've been seeing some videos by some American firms that do like home automation where drones just take off on the, 10-acre farm that they have and do a periphery run, check if there are any intruders, etc. And those seem to be autonomous, right? There's nobody controlling those drones. It's a very small area, but it's, geo-fenced. When do you see that happening? Would you have to rely on these providers, or you're saying this is the model that will work in the long run?
It won't. It won't. It's same as the PCO example that I gave you a couple of minutes ago. PCOs had a legit use case for the duration that they existed, but once everyone had access to a telephone line, PCOs sort of became very rarely used. So drones also, it's one of those few areas where the technology is ready, like blockchain. I mean, the technology is ready, but the government is still not sure if autonomous flights are safe. So not just in India, globally, there's a limitation to how you can use drones, and the limitation is that you can't fly beyond line of sight. So you always need to have a human piloting the drone, even if the drone is flying autonomously. I mean, the drones today as well fly autonomously, but you still need to have a human just keeping an eye on the drone. Once these policy changes start happening globally, I think Israel has taken the first steps. A couple of Israeli companies are now mapping out a few mines autonomously from some 600 kilometers away. As the policy changes start happening, I think data collection will be automated as well. And you wouldn't really have pilots flying the drones, you'll have drones flying themselves every day at your site.
Given
That's a
that's a given, without a doubt. I think if you're looking at large areas of land, I think you look at a company like Zipline or any of them. They're going from city to city or village to village, transporting medical devices. That's where some of the real world-changing use cases come into play, right? Where they're going
Sure.
beyond just a specific area. When do you see that becoming a normal? what's your over under?
So I think COVID-19 has definitely given a big boost to this aspect. I mean, specifically for medical deliveries, and I feel the technology is more or less ready. Of course, it's not perfect, but it is at least to a level wherein you can start doing pilots. And I think the regulatory framework is a couple of years behind on this, not just in India but globally. And as that starts catching up, I think a lot of traction should happen in that space. Zipline specifically has been doing some phenomenal work. And I think specifically for use cases wherein it's difficult to access remote locations and blood is needed or medical supplies are needed or even food supplies are needed. I think drones offer a phenomenal use case and that would definitely become a big story. It has already started shaping up during COVID-19. And I think in the next one to 2 years, this space should really boom. It's likely to boom very strong.
You mentioned a lot of different industries want to use drones and they've approached you. Which has been some of the craziest requirements you've got? I mean, I would imagine right from wanting to catch smugglers to, you know, I don't know, patrolling the ocean. There must be like ton of requests coming your way. I met somebody a month ago. They were part of this particular accelerator. I don't remember which one, and they were working on finding the female mosquito on stagnant pools of water to
Sure.
help the civic bodies control mosquito production or reproduction and manage the mosquito population. And my mind was blown what these guys are doing. What are some of the cool things that you wish you could get to do, but you just are not able to?
So a couple of years ago, one of the defense organizations came to us with a very interesting request. So they told us that they have these devices which can sort of eavesdrop on people. So you get the device near the house, and they'll be sort of understanding. They'll be able to hear what's happening inside the house, get the conversations in. And now the challenge was, how do you take the device to a specific location while going to that location?
Oh my
So there
god!
you
Like, tell me something. I mean, drones are loud. They're not sound. That you know a drone is close by when it's making that sound, right? You can easily I'm sure even listening to something might be very hard beyond the sounds that they're making.
correct. But then the sound is in a certain frequency, and you can always filter out that frequency. Unless the amplitude of that sound is crazy high and you can't really hear anything else. But then, I mean, the frequency of the motors is sort of predictable. So they really wanted us to mount this sensor on a drone and get the drone near the house and actually listen to what's happening inside the house. Of course, we couldn't do that. It did not really fit into what we do as a business, but that was the weirdest and the most interesting use case that we've been pitched to do for them.
There are obviously a lot of other segments you want to look at, and you're looking at solar as a specific segment to go after. And you said India is the fourth largest uh, drone asset,
Solar.
solar asset in the world. Which are the top three? I would imagine. I mean, some countries in Africa, some parts of Australia, and UAE. What's the
For solar specifically, I mean, basis how much solar energy is being produced globally, the top three would be US, China, and Japan.
Oh, I
So
was
these are
completely
the
off. I was completely off. I didn't even mention these three countries.
probably you were addressing where drones have a use case. I mean, but solar industry in itself, solar as a power generation mechanism, US, China, and Japan are pretty big. China is not very welcoming. They do not really like giving access to companies outside of China to their power plants, while they love access of the entire world's energy. US is a great market, quite densely populated with our competitors though. On the other hand, Japan is a nice opportunity. Uh, we felt and realized that instead of chasing the largest uh, countries, for example, US, China, Japan, where there are already a lot of competitors, it probably makes more sense to be going to smaller countries, like all of these Southeast Asian countries. Vietnam has some 500 megawatt of solar, while India has about 40,000 megawatts. So it's extremely small in comparison to Vietnam or to India. But having said this, no one else is interested in that market. Quite similarly, Italy doesn't have a lot of solar projects, but then they still have some 500, 600 megawatts, which is of interest to us, but probably not of interest to anyone else in the world. So that's the approach that we'll take as we expand outside of India. Reach out to markets where no one else is interested in them. No one wants to go there because they are small, so small. But coming from India, we have our own cost advantages and we can actually address those markets. So that's going to be our strategy, I think, in this aspect.
So you're extremely asset light. You must probably have what, 5 team members lesser to run
So
such a large
we are
operation?
Yeah, we are 10 now, probably going to 15 in a couple of months. We are one of the few companies who are not laying off people and like not stopped hiring right now, even during the COVID. But then again, extremely asset light. There are no capital investments. The team is the investment for us. They are everything for us. And extremely asset light, yes. Operations heavy, capital.
So do you calculate the business as a monthly recurring revenue, as an annual? I mean, here it looks like 20-year recurring revenue. How do you plan for that?
So quite honestly, we don't have a lot of 20-year contracts. Most of our contracts are anywhere between 1 to 2 years right now. But that's also because the industry in itself doesn't trust a very, very new technology. While they are a new technology in itself, but they do have the inhibitions as to how will the drones continue flying forever? What if there's a change in the technology itself? What if tomorrow you don't need a pilot, but you can have a drone flying all by itself? So there are some innovations that the industry has, but that's slowly changing. As we build a deeper relationship with all of these clients, and as they start trusting our technology, our presence in itself, I think these will transition into longer 5-year contracts, 7-year contracts, and eventually 20-year contracts.
So being asset light, you're probably generating a lot of revenue for your investors and for yourself. Are you
Uh,
closing it on a few million as monthly recurring revenue?
no, we're very small. We are still very, very small. We would be annualized around that number right now. But having said this, I think we've got our feet in the right place, and we have a deep understanding of the industry now. Uh, and I think we should head in that direction very, very soon.
I mean, growing with the solar industry in itself, and I think you mentioned solar is still a very small percentage of all utilization of space that we have for solar, and I think more countries are allocating more of their resources towards solar generation. So, do you see you know doing projects that will help them create better solar businesses, etc., that becoming another revenue stream at all?
It could, it totally could. I mean, to give you an insight into solar, this is one of those few rare businesses in the world that have grown 530% in the last 3 years, 4 years, and yet only account for 2% of the total energy production. I mean, even after growing at 530% in the last 3 years, solar is only 2% of India's total energy production right now. So the domain is probably going to still continue growing at that rate. And as you correctly said, we're just sort of riding on the growth of the industry itself.
Do you see any other changes happening that could affect solar in general? I know that the costs have dropped drastically, and that has resulted in more investments in this. But that has also resulted in some of the older players who've made large investments into solar assets being kind of caught off guard because of drop in price. So, how has that affected the industry?
So a couple of things specifically related to COVID that have happened are interesting. So people realized that most of the modules in itself, most of the pieces of technology that are used to build a solar farm were coming from China, and that disrupted the supply chain in a big manner. So some of our clients fortunately had a lot of Indian modules being used, a lot of Indian pieces of technology being used. So those people are still on track. They are still developing their assets and they're still, I mean, on their timelines. So I think one good learning from this situation for our clients has been that how do you promote the Indian manufacturing of solar modules, of solar based technologies? So that's going to be a good learning here. But having said this, of course, the supply chain disruption has brought down the speed here in the market for us. Overall, if you evaluate the risks to the industry, of course, till about 7, 8 years ago, till about 10 years ago, solar had an obvious risk. The risk was from the oil mafia, and that happened to one very, very large American company as well. They did very, very well with solar, but then the lobbying against them from the oil mafia sort of made them call it a day. But now the times have changed. There's less power in other uh, sources of energy, and solar in itself has both the government approval, the policy approval, uh, the UN Sustainable Development Goals approval, and more interestingly, the approval from the investors who want to put in money into an asset like this. So right now, I think all of the things are going very, very well in favor of the space, minus the local minimas and maximas of supply chain disruption, price issues. I think overall we are still in a very good place, and the industry shall continue growing at least for the next decade or so. I mean, of course, all of us want our energy to be coming from a clean source. Who wants to use electricity coming in from oil? I mean, people wouldn't make that choice if they had a choice.
Renewals is the way to go, without a doubt. So let's come to the fun segment of this. I've been seeing a few videos the last, especially during the lockdown, of people racing their drones and on these courses. I think it's called the Drone League or something. Do you guys participate? What's the story there?
Oh no, we've not participated, and I actually miss flying a drone because unfortunately, since the business doesn't have any drones, I do not have any drones right now.
Okay.
So I've been really making a drone for myself. I mean, just the other day, a friend of mine called me. He wanted yeast for making bread, and he was like, "Yeah, तेरे पास तो drone पड़ा होगा ना, थोड़ा लगा के भेज दे जल्दी से." So, so those kind of fun activities I've been craving a lot and missing. So probably right after the lockdown, I'm going to go and buy a small drone for myself, not as a business, but then probably as a hobby. I mean, it's really good to have these fun machines flying around you all through the day.
So there is no regulation on small drones, right? I think if it is smaller than a certain size, there's no regulation because it suppose it cannot harm anyone or anybody or anything.
So in India, unfortunately, even for the smaller drones, you need permission. But then globally, a lot of countries allow you to fly drones up to 250 grams without any specific permissions.
So you're saying that even if I buy my son, well, I don't have a son, but even if I buy my son something small to play with, I would have to register it as a licensed toy to be played with.
Sure, absolutely. There was this joke running around till DGC did not come up with the regulations. There was a blanket ban on anything flying. So, unfortunately, a side effect of the blanket ban was that kite flying too was banned. I mean, the wordings of those blanket ban, the definitions was such that even flying a kite was illegal per se. So there was a joke running around, forget drones, you can't even fly a kite in India without permissions.
Oh, that's crazy. They went the whole hog and banned everything. But I think people are banning, well, the government is banning a lot of things during that time.
Sure, sure. I mean, yes, that happened. But then I think now that people realize that, of course, there are risks. I mean, there's risk of a lot of things not nice happening with the drone. But the value being created by these machines is probably a lot more than the risk that they present. And that people have started realizing now. I mean, you hear almost every municipal authority right now wanting to try drones using COVID. You hear Prime Minister Modi asking people to map out entire villages altogether using drones. You hear people using drones for curtailing mosquito populations, drones for energy, drones for agriculture, drones for defense. So while of course people are very, they question if it's safe to have these machines flying around, but they do use those machines while questioning their own existence as well.
That's the interesting thing about new technology, right? It does open up new avenues that you can actually do, things that you never thought you could do before. I mean, who thought, a device like this would come and would try to solve the mosquito population? Because I'm from Chennai, and in Chennai, mosquitoes are a huge problem. I don't remember a single summer where I didn't have mosquitoes, biting me in the evening or, after your job. It's terrible, right? You never wanted to think about that again. In Gurgaon, it's not become so bad, but for the longest time. So you're used to mosquito spray, repellents, creams, your devices on the wall, and more recently fumigation. Right? There's a lot of people walking around with devices just fumigating places so that there's no stagnant water and all of that. So we had public service messages, right? Don't use stagnant water, clean it up, do this, do that, because people died. I think more people have died, because of malaria and dengue in the last year uh, than, well, too early to say, but of COVID. So reality is there's a lot other things that there are, and nobody thought drones would come and solve for that. And it's a very interesting time to live in. And do you see any other challenges, that are public, um, you know, technically they should be public goods? I think security seems to be the next thing. Like you talked about, an agency wanting you to spy on somebody, but the reality is, do you see that working more at traffic signals, late at night, where both using autonomous plus some sort of intelligence to track and maintain security, because it seems like a very very futuristic, but I don't think it's too far away.
Sure. And quite honestly, the kind of technology that already exists with our defense services, specifically the National Security Guard, it's quite advanced already. I mean, if they really want to know what's happening inside a household, they have better means to do it. Drones probably won't be used in that aspect, but then drones do bring a lot of privacy issues with them. So, for example, someone might be sunbathing on the roof and a drone flies over. So the person did not give the permission for him to be captured in that manner, right? India, unfortunately, doesn't prioritize privacy and does not really understand what privacy and rights are in general. But then the countries that do, the biggest the nuisance that a drone brings to the table is privacy issues. How do you do something good with these machines while still taking care of the rights and the privacy of the people on the ground? Because I mean, if you go to a market, for example, and you see a drone flying over you, you did not really authorize the drone to take pictures of you, but the drone is still nonetheless taking pictures of you. That's probably not a concern in India. People get excited. Hey, I've seen a drone flying over me. It feels so cool. But in the US, people actually feel and understand that it's not just a drone flying over you, it's a camera that's flying over you. And the camera is probably clicking thousands of images of you. And with those images, you can sort of model anything, man. You can, if you click probably 200 pictures of me, you can have a 3D model of me. And if you have a 3D model of me, you can sort of put me uh, in a situation, have some CGI around it, and make me actually do things that I'm not doing. You can do a lot of things with those images. People who know how to do them can do that. So of course, privacy risk is the biggest risk with drones. But then I think most of the drone companies that we engage with and most of the companies that I know in India are extremely responsible. Some of the larger players specifically, all of us, I think, really prioritize this because we understand that sooner or later people will realize that pictures are being clicked, and when they do, they should know and they should feel safe that they're being not misused, they're not being stored, they're not being abused, and they're going to a company that actually respects the fact that those pictures are in their data warehouses.
So there's, of course, when industries are new, there are no regulation, right? And people can take, their clients for a ride or anything. So I'm, from what you're saying, seems to be some unset rules, but these rules are, how do we ensure that everything is safe, data is safe and secure, that they're giving that kind of confidence to their clients that, this cannot be misused, won't be misused, and be utilized in a way that is actually advancing society. Uh, and I think it's fair, because if it's a new technology, you want everybody to be um, confident that they can deliver, and give them the security. Otherwise, you can't grow your business, uh, because there's going to be this doubt saying, okay, I don't trust you because, hey, that incident happened, and why are you any different? It's a very, very fair point. So thanks so much for taking the time, Jaspreet. This has been a great conversation. Having you here talking about drones, solar, whatnot. I think we should do another podcast with you, just talking about fermentation. And I think the audience probably is going to take away a few of pointers from that too.
Definitely. I mean, fermentation is shaping up brilliantly globally, and I would love to do that. It's something that's very close to me.
If you have some resources that I could share with the audience, I would definitely love to put it in the show notes, and we can get them to test it out. And do you have any way? Are you guys hiring? What's the story? You said you're hiring another five folks. If somebody had reached out to you, what kind of people are you looking for, and how do they reach out to you?
I'm very accessible on LinkedIn. I'm almost always active over there. I'm more active on LinkedIn than on Instagram. And again, we are hiring for technology folks. We are hiring for people in the sales. So yeah, I mean, predominantly, I think all across functions, we are looking for smart people to come on board.
Fantastic. So I'm going to leave your LinkedIn kind of profile in the show notes. And I've also been following some of the videos you've been putting out. I think you talked about, what you've been doing through COVID-19, and, how it's been affecting your life and so on. Keep it going. You're what? You're really young. Like how, 25, 26?
28 now.
Okay, you okay, but amazing to have accomplished so much at such a young age. I think a lot of younger folks can take inspiration from your journey, and also start going into uncharted waters, right? And take that kind of bet. So thanks so much for being on the podcast. We'll be happy to have you again, and share more insight.
Thanks a lot, Varun. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, that's the end of this episode of Stars and Startups. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter of Stars and Startups on stars.substack.com. Don't miss that, so that you can get the episodes delivered directly to your inbox. And do give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to this podcast, on whichever player, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, so more people can find out about us. I really, really need your help, so that you can share the episodes and others can find us. And keep subscribing. Do write to me. You can find me on Twitter at Varun Vumidi. Okay, I will see you on the next episode.